Hello there. I just have had an enormous amount of trouble getting to this point where I'm sitting in front of a camera, and I still face a fair bit of nerves and trepidation and thinking, what's going to happen with this video? Let's see how we go anyway. So, topic, the team. Just going to the Moodle materials cover this quite well, but I'm just going to talk in general terms about some of the issues, the key issues in relation to group and team behaviour. A group or a team are pretty interchangeable, two or more individuals interacting and interdependent who've come together to achieve particular objectives. Now, the key word there, they have to have something to do with each other, and they have to be interdependent. One individual depends on the other person's individual. And so we're looking at the issue of synergies between individuals towards a group goal or a single goal or a set of goals that individuals work together towards, and they're the objectives element. So Quinn says there's no agreed definition of a team or group, but four characteristics that are regarded as being elements of a group to become a team: has to have committed to a common goal, have to have clear interdependent roles, communication structure that fosters some kind of information sharing, we're not communicating by telepathy, and the presence of a sense of mutual accountability, which is close to the issue of a mutual, communal outcome. People are drawn into groups by a number of different factors. Status, the higher status that can come from being inside a group or a member of an in-group, as opposed to being on the outside of a particular group. They can be drawn into a group by similarity. People tend to identify with people that are similar to themselves. You'll find that, for example, in expatriate communities. If you go to one of the largest cities in the world, whether it's London or Rio de Janeiro, you'll find, for example, Australians gathering together in themed pubs, for example, drawn together by not so much an actual similarity, but a perceived likeness between them. But also there's an issue of the distinctiveness or the difference between yourself and members of your group and other people's characteristics. Groups offer individuals a kind of group brain, if you like, an ability to tap into group norms and group think that reduces one's sense of uncertainty, and humans love to move away from positions of doubt. We don't like doubt at all. I'll just quickly go through those points. You can slow down and look at those points, but the points were already made. In relation to group decision-making, there are a number of elements to group decision-making that one needs to keep into account when one's running an organisation from a managerial perspective. Groups tend to make decisions more sluggishly than the individual is capable of. And there is a real threat that a well-functioning team, or what we would call a well-functioning team with low levels of conflict, will have tendencies towards groupthink or conformity thinking. Individuals perversely may dominate these teams, and so the flavour of one particularly effective communicator may permeate the whole group. And also this diminution or reduction of responsibility. By having a group, the question arises in the individual's mind is, well, if I make a little mistake, well, it's actually going to be the group's responsibility, and that can play on the quality of decision-making in terms of conservative decision-making or even risky decision-making, this kind of question mark over responsibility. On the positive side, groups tend to, particularly diverse groups, tend to make more thorough, well-thought-out decisions, and you'll find that in good quality juries, they will go through, instead of just going on a single gut feeling, but by being forced to explain their position in a group setting, they will make more thorough decisions. And they tend to have greater levels of creativity and greater diversity of views, particularly, once again, if the group is diverse. There's also increased buy-in. If a group makes a decision, even if it's really dominated by an individual, you can't come away from that saying, well, you know, look, we made that decision, but I wash my hands of that decision. You'll find it much easier to carry out or roll out that decision because you'll have had the tacit or actual participation of individuals. There are biases, which I just touched on. We tend to, in-group versus out-group are terms from sociology that you may have heard of in ordinary language, but we tend to favour members of our own group regardless of whether or not they deserve it, and we tend to be prejudiced against members of out-groups whether or not they deserve it, and we tend to see the world through group lenses. Racism, for example, is a classic. Even being randomly assigned to a group or random labelling. I sometimes do this with classes and just say, the guys on the left, the guys on the right. But there's some famous experiments using, for example, eye colour, blue eyes versus brown eyes, in some education studies in America in the 1950s, where we were talking about classes that were all white, so it wasn't a colour thing, but just an eye colour thing, created an enormous amount of actual differences started to appear as a result of this random difference. So the group has an enormous amount of power over perception and reality. Interestingly, Asian cultures suffer less from these kind of in-group biases, probably because they have a very strong group basis embedded within their culture, and they don't have this tendency to emphasize the power of the group in determining individual characteristics. And I think that might be it, or yeah, that's it. Okay, brief, but hopefully somewhat useful in getting your mind around some of the key issues.